Good afternoon. My name is Councillor James Tonkin and I'm the Chairman of the North Somerset Council Planning and Regulatory Committee. I would like to welcome you to this first face-to-face meeting post-lockdown here at the Town Hall. The meeting, the membership of which is reduced in number as a result of COVID restrictions, is being streamed live on YouTube and a recording will be available from the Council's website within the next 48 hours. I would like to introduce the officers who are with me today. Head of Planning, Richard Kent, Strategic Development Manager, Roger Wilmot, Principal Planning Officer, Sally Evans, Senior Highways Engineer, James Wigmore, and Sue Buck from our legal team. I would like to thank them for all the effort that they've put in to enable this meeting to happen. Can you please all turn off mobile phones as the first thing, since this is live streamed especially. And it has been noted that the reduced list of numbers of members above the agenda is incorrect. So it contains the members from the last meeting. So that's been altered at our end. Okay. Right. I'll now go to the agenda. Item 1, election of Vice Chairman for the municipal year 2021-22. Please, may I have any nominations? Councillor Bridger.
Chair, I'd like to nominate Councillor Crockford-Hawley as Vice Chair. I don't think anyone has a firmer grip of planning policies in the wider development plan context than John, and I don't think neither would he be hoodwinked by anyone if he was to take the chair, so I'd nominate John.
Thank you for that. Does that find a second?
Second that, Chairman.
Second.
Thank you. Okay. So, Councillor Crockford-Hawley, do you accept the nomination?
Reluctantly, yes.
Oh, thank you
very much.
Okay. Right. Are there any other nominations? Thank you, Councillor Shopland. Can you switch your microphone on, please, David?
I'm not sure that I know what's going on because I haven't had a meeting for a long time. But, Mr. Chairman, I believe that Councillor Crockford-Hawley is the Chairman of the Planning Scrutiny Committee. Am I correct?
You're very observant, yes.
Well, if so, is that not a conflict of interest?
No. It's been checked with the solicitor to the council, and it's not.
Yeah, but when he's Vice Chairman, he has to do what he's told, Mr. Chairman.
That will never happen.
You reckon?
I take a leaf out of Councillor Shopland's book in that respect.
Okay. No other nominations? Okay, thank you. Therefore, I declare that Councillor John Crockford-Hawley is Vice Chairman for the ensuing year. Thank you very much, John. Okay. Public speaking. There are 5 people wishing to make representation, 3 are in attendance, and 2 have made written submission, which will be read out by Sue Buck. Speakers, when your name is called, please advance to the designated seat, make your representation lasting no more than 3 minutes, and then return to your original place, please. Right. I will now invite Dr. David Martin to address the committee in regard of the application to the east of Youngwood Lane, Nailsea. Dr. Martin, would you like to come forward, please?
Good afternoon. This application is opposed by Nailsea Town Council, Backwell Parish Council, many Nailsea residents and Backwell Residents Association. Why? Because it contravenes so many of North Somerset Council's own policies. The site is outside the Nailsea settlement boundary. The access road crosses a designated local green space. The site is entirely within the protected strategic gap between Nailsea and Backwell. The site is not designated for development in North Somerset's site allocations policies. What was the point of the time and effort expended in developing council policies if a London-based landowner and her Bristol developer can redraw the council's policy maps for the sake of just 14 houses, which would make negligible difference to the North Somerset's housing requirements? The land registry shows that the owner of the present site has restrictions on the disposal of the next 3 fields, all the way to the Backwell boundary. No doubt in anticipation of further development, possibly via the open hammerhead, where the road width matches that at the Perrings entrance. Ironically, the developers suggest that a non-statutory wildlife designation can protect the lower fields while seeking to overturn all the policies protecting the upper field. Failure to protect this upper site within a strategic gap and including local green space from development will make it harder to defend other apparently protected land, both here and elsewhere. Council policies need to be upheld here. I am astonished how little attention has been given to road safety. The access road immediately turns right behind the walls of Plot 1 and its mouth forms an offset crossroad with Walnut Close across the Perrings. Commercial vehicles crossing from one side to the other, forced by the geometry to cut the corners, could meet an oncoming vehicle in the target cul-de-sac and be stuck broadside on across the Perrings just below the brow of a hill. If it can happen, it will happen. As this type of crossing has been avoided elsewhere on feeder roads, either by significant staggering of opposing cul-de-sacs or blocking one side of a potential through route, why is this arrangement deemed acceptable here? As regards the new road, on the 2nd of June 2020, the Highways Officer demanded 2-metre wide footways on both sides of the road if it was planned for adoption. This is consistent with the Council's 2020 Highways Development Design Guide, signed off last year by today's Chairman. Yet, on the 30th of October, Highways reduced the requirement to 1.2 metre footway on only one side. Another policy overturned to allow this poor quality layout to be squeezed into this inappropriate site. I urge you to stand by council policies and vote against this application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. I will now invite Ms. Coral Curtis from Grassroots to address the committee in regard to the same application. Ms. Curtis.
Sorry. So there we are. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. These small-scale proposals are being led by a local company, Clifton Homes, who are committed to building unique, energy-efficient, high-quality developments that respect the character of the area. The 2 key concerns raised during the last discussion included potential impact on the strategic gap and possible further development to the south of the site. The impact on the strategic gap was discussed at length and resulted in councillors voting for a site visit. We recognise that from the Perrings open space to the east, there are some limited views towards Backwell. However, we hope that councillors noted that when you walk onto the application site itself, views are obscured greatly due to the change in topography and existing tree cover, which will be retained and reinforced as part of the development, meaning there are extremely limited views, if any, of the neighbouring settlement. As set out in the officer's updated report, the site constitutes just 1% on the very edge of the strategic gap, and they have assessed the development against this issue thoroughly, confirming there would be no adverse impact. Councillors were also concerned that this development may lead to further homes to the south of the site. We wish to clarify and confirm that neither Clifton Homes nor the landowners control any other land in the nearby vicinity. This was incorrectly stated by an objector previously. Furthermore, there is not an empty plot purposefully left vacant at the end of the hammerhead to provide a future access route. It is the position of the proposed drainage solution, which is located underneath the public open space in the southwest corner of the development. As outlined at the April meeting, your Highways Department have confirmed that the current road layout would not be suitable for an intensification of use, and the public open space in the southwestern corner would be secured in perpetuity through a Section 106 agreement, which would mean a new road could not pass over it. The Council's highways officers have also confirmed that the road access arrangements and their relationship to other roads on the pairings are safe and designed to an acceptable standard. The loss of the triangular parcel of land which fronts the pairings and forms part of the open space designation has also been raised by local residents. To confirm, whilst this part of the site was noted on the approved plans, there were no planning conditions nor a legal agreement which required it to be delivered, and it has never been passed to the Council for adoption. In contrast, the development will formally secure this as public open space, and it will be used for enhanced biodiversity management. The main part of the pairings open space is unaffected by the proposals. Clifton Homes have worked hard over the last year to address the concerns raised, and we would ask councillors to consider the merits of the scheme, which includes a high-quality bespoke design which delivers much-needed market and affordable housing, including bungalows, whilst also supporting the local economy through increased spending and jobs in construction. We therefore respectfully request that you disregard the two previous suggestions made regarding the applicant's additional land and the prospect of further development to the south, and support your officer's recommendation to approve the application today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Curtis. I will now ask Sue Buck to read out a submission from Mr Gareth Jackson of Alder King in regard to the application at B&M Bargains, Clevedon. Sue.
On behalf of our team, we want to express our passionate belief in the potential of Clevedon and the significance of the benefits this proposed scheme will deliver, and are sorry that current restrictions prevent us from being there in person to fully convey our excitement and long-term commitment to the town's future. This scheme is the culmination of 24 months of stakeholder engagement and design evolution. From the outset, our aspirations for the site have been simple yet powerful, to 1, create an attractive gateway that increases Clevedon's appeal as a destination, 2, modernise, diversify and increase the resilience of the centre's retail offering, 3, provide more life and activity to the area through a complementary mix of uses, 4, deliver a scheme that local residents and businesses are proud of and that stimulates further investment and regeneration. We strongly believe the submitted scheme will achieve these goals. We are approaching the end of a 35-year lease, which provides a once-in-a-generation opportunity to regain control of the site and reverse its persistent decline through a multi-million-pound investment, something that is rare in the current retail and economic climate. We also want to help rejuvenate Queen's Square, recognising its importance to the community and the traders. As the land is mainly outside our ownership boundary, we commit to contributing a minimum of £100,000 to the Council for improvements to be carried out in consultation with local stakeholders, which will revitalise the public space at the community's heart and provide a safer environment for residents after hours. The plans incorporate a well-designed, modest block of senior living accommodation. To clarify, this accommodation is the non-assisted, modern type increasingly sought by active downsizers. These residents are typically strong contributors to their community, not least as spenders and volunteers. We understand that parking is a sensitive subject, but it is important to note that this is a private car park whose owner has no legal obligation to make any public provision. The car park is over-provisioned, a legacy of its original service to car-dependent food store customers in the 1980s, and if a similar new build stall sought permission today, the adopted parking standards would require approximately the number of spaces that our plans propose. The proposals have emerged through an extensive consultation with officers and stakeholders and has secured the support from key local groups including traders, Clevedon Bid and the Chamber of Commerce. To summarise, these proposals represent a genuine, once-in-a-generation opportunity to regenerate and future-proof Clevedon Town Centre and fulfil North Somerset's placemaking aspirations. We urge this committee to seize it for the sake of local businesses, residents and all those striving to help the town thrive long into the future.
Thank you, Sue. I will now invite Mr John Cockram to address the committee in regard to the application at Moor Lane, Yatton. Mr Cockram. Thank you. Could you put your microphone on, please, John?
Good afternoon. My name is John Cockram. I'm a resident of Yatton. This application, which I wish to object to, is for the development of Persimmon Home site off Moor Road. Yatton Parish Council, supported by many residents, have strongly opposed this development since 2015. Unusually, this is not about housing numbers, but about access to the housing development. The application was twice refused by North Somerset P&R Committee in 2019. Persimmon Homes did not appeal, but instead in 2020 put forward a revised application, again using the orchard as access. This was refused unanimously by this P&R Committee on the 21st of April this year. We need to protect the orchard site, which is rich in biodiversity and an important relic of Yatton's history. The access road across the orchard will result in the removal of over 300 metres of hedgerow, the loss of some of the remaining apple trees which host the nationally rare orchard tooth fungus. The 2-year construction period will affect the greater and lesser horseshoe bat's flight path and destroy their natural habitat. Upon completion of the development, the orchard will still be developed. It will have footpaths, a children's play area, pavements and a road, all of which will cause irreversible harm to the sustainability of this sensitive and delicate site. Also, the site is less than 10 metres from the Kenmore SSSI, and the development will have an adverse effect on the open rural character of the gateway to the village of Yatton. And this also includes very fine views of a Grade 2 listed farmhouse at the back end of the site. For these reasons, Natural England believes that the orchard should remain undeveloped. By removing the hedgerow on Moor Road, the development of 60 houses will exit onto a narrow lane close to the junction with Kenmore Road. Traffic movements were claimed by Persimmon to be between 20 and 30 per hour on Kenmore Road at this junction. In fact, in one afternoon, residents recorded over 430 movements in over a 1-hour period. We are all aware of the pending planning application for resident development of the Yatton Rugby Club land by Strongbox. There is absolutely no need to access the site through the orchard. Access through the rugby club site directly onto the B3133 makes sense, as it puts the new primary school, the village amenities and the railway station within easy reach of the development. This solution is preferred by local residents, Yatton Parish Council, and is acceptable to Strongbox. Surely, after 6 years, a strong case exists to make Persimmon Homes wait for access through the rugby club land. No homes will be lost. The 60 homes will be built. There will just be a delay in their construction. So I plead with you to refuse this application for a second time. Thank you for hearing from me.
Thank you, Mr. Cochrane. Again, now I'll ask Sue Butt to read out a submission from Persimmon Homes in regard to the same application. Sue.
Thank you, Chairman. The officer's report is commended, and this statement responds to specific matters raised during the previous committee and the officer's report. Members will be aware that the development site is allocated for residential development with an access road across the orchard to only be considered if an alternative access arrangement cannot be made. Persimmon Homes have demonstrated that an alternative access cannot be achieved. As stated, the rugby club has no development status, and any suggestion that this is a suitable alternative would be premature, as it does not accord with the development plan. This is also detailed in the officer's report. Furthermore, the submitted habitats regulation assessment and supporting landscaping plans detail the ecological and landscape mitigation. These have not been objected to by Natural England. Furthermore, it is noted in the officer report that reference was made at the previous planning committee to the Yatton Neighbourhood Plan. The proposed development accords with the Yatton Neighbourhood Plan. The alternative access proposed via the rugby club would in fact conflict with the Neighbourhood Plan and the Development Plan. The officer report makes reference to 2 outstanding matters. 1, clarification on the renewable energy provision. We have confirmed with the officer that we will deliver the 15% renewable energy required as per Condition 20 and in accordance with Policy CS1 and CS2. 2, confirmation concerning compliance with Policy DM42. We have submitted a table which confirms each unit complies with the national space standards. Therefore, all matters have been considered and addressed. In light of the above, the development accords entirely with the development plan as set out in the officer's report. NPPF paragraph 11, open bracket C, close bracket, states, plans and decisions should apply a presumption in favour of sustainable development. For decision taking, this means approving development proposals that accord with an up-to-date development plan without delay. Therefore, we respectfully request members to reconsider their previous position and consider their officer's recommendation and approve the development. That's the end, Chairman.
Thank you, Sue. That concludes the public speaking, and thank you to everybody who contributed. Thank you. Move to item 3 now. Apologies for absence and notification of substitution. Sue again.
Chairman, there are no apologies. The Assistant Director of Legal and Governance and Monitoring Officer has received the following notification of substitutes. Councillor Shopland is substituting for Councillor Tucker, and Councillor Crosby is substituting for Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Sue. Declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest. Are there any?
There are none, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 5, minutes of the meeting of the 21st of April 2021 to be approved as a correct record. Please may I have a proposal? Thank you. Is that seconded, Richard? Yeah, okay, thank you. All those in favour of me signing them as a correct record? Thank you, that's carried. Okay. Matters referred by Council, the Executive or any other committees?
There are none, Chairman.
Thank you, Sue. Item 7, Section 1 report. Erection of 14 dwellings at land to the east of Youngwood Lane, Nailsea. This item was deferred from the last meeting to enable a site visit, which duly took place on Friday the 14th of May. I will now invite Roger Wilmot to present the report. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. I'll just run through quickly the background to the application and then I'll quickly provide a summary of the update sheet additions to the printed agenda report. So first up, an indication on the site, which is to the south of the pairings. It's denoted by the red outline here, with the access coming through roughly at this point here. Seeing it in its wider context, you'll see the site here again off the pairings. It's principally the rectangular area here with the pointed bit leading onto the pairings here. And as many of you will recall, we've already had an appeal decision which has allowed development off to the west of Youngwood Lane in this broad area here, and we recently approved a reserved matters application, the first reserved matters application for that large development there. And also there's a development that's been approved on council-owned site to the south of the uplands here. And further to the west, there's the Engine Lane site also that's received recent approval. As part of the Youngwood Lane package, again, I think I've mentioned at previous meetings, there are various packages of improvements to transport, roads and cycle and footpath links in the area that will be effectively funded by that development. Just showing the proposed development in somewhat more detail. This is the main rectangular field that I referred to, and then the access is coming through the area of green space here at the moment. As you'll see from that, the significant chunk of what's currently green space will remain so and will have additional planting, particularly I think along the southern boundary. The development shows the 14 dwellings, including bungalows, and margins along the south and west in recognition of the biodiversity needs of the site. Down to the bottom corner, there's the proposed open space that's been referred to, as well as the area at the entrance to the site, and this is where the drainage feature is located. As you'll see, there's one footpath shown along the north side of the access road, and you can see the relationship to existing properties on the south side of the pairings here. The properties here are shown as bungalows, and then there's a mix then of houses along the rest of the site of varying sizes. Just an indication of the nature of the street scene that would result from an approval of this application. I think we felt that these were indicative of a sensitive approach to the character of Nailsea. They're quite varied. They're, I think, rather different than we tend to see from the volume house builders. And as you'll see, we've got the bungalows at the entrance to the site along the northern side of the road. This one here, or this has now been amended to remove a dormer on the rear elevation that might have posed potentially some question about overlooking in relation to one of the existing dwellings. That's now been changed, so it's only roof lights on the back at high level, I think with the dormer being moved to the front elevation. And you'll see here the southern side of the access road, again with an attractive street scene resulting from that. In cross-sectional details, one can gain an idea of the fact that the development will involve a degree of cutting into existing ground levels with a small degree of fill to ensure level site. So this particular cross-section is at the closer to the entrance to the site, so shows the single-storey dwellings cut down into existing ground level to create what we think is a satisfactory relationship with those existing dwellings on the pairings. The second one here, again, shows perhaps a slightly steeper gradient, and that cross-section is taken through here, but again indicates how these sit on the hillside in a suitable fashion. And just at the bottom of the site, you'll see an indication of where the biodiversity corridor will be created. In that there will be additional planting. The question of how the proposed development relates to the strategic gap between Nailsea and Backwell has been raised, I think, on a number of occasions. This particular plan shows the designated strategic gap in the brown colour, with the proposed development site excluded from that. So the strategic gap, effectively the loss of strategic gap, amounts to this area here. That is, I think we've calculated that as around about or just over 1% of the total area of the strategic gap. This just briefly is an indication, again, the development site here, and this shows with a red outline the land which the Town Council has sought to have designated as a village green. As you'll see, there is no direct implications for that proposed designation as a result of the application. Again, this is the local green space as shown in the local planning policies. Development site again shown here, and it's this area here really that is the reduction in that local green space. As you'll see, there is local green space further off to the west, as well as this more substantial area here. And again, I think by our calculations, that is around about 1% loss of that. I think it might even be less than that. but essentially our view is that it is a very small percentage of that local green space that is affected by the application, and particularly the access point for the application. There was a further point, I think, raised in connection with the local nature site. The sort of blue colour wash over this particular plan shows that area, and again I think you'll see from the application site, which is here leading up to the pairings, that is not or does not affect this local wildlife site. I'll just turn quickly to the update sheet. We'd had additional comments from Natural England in connection with the Habitats Regulations Assessment, and they had sought additional planting on the southern and western boundaries, particularly with mature native hedgerow plants to reinforce the dark buffer for horseshoe bats. That has now been agreed by the applicant, and they will provide additional tree and hedge planting on those southern and western boundaries. The applicants also submitted the revised site layout plan. As I mentioned, plot 6 has been amended to remove the only north-facing dormer window and replace it with high-level roof light. It's reorientated that plot slightly so that the rear elevation is not facing so directly towards existing neighbours. It proposes a 3-metre wide blended crossing at the junction of the access road with the pairings, which effectively will provide rather more priority for pedestrians at that point of crossing it to obtain access to the development. It includes a 1.2 metre wide footpath with curb along the northern side of the site access road, and confirms that the access road is 5 metres wide with a half-metre service strip on the southern side. There are, in terms of our additional comments, the 14-day notification period of those amendments lapsed on the 11th of June. Our view is that the proposals are acceptable and that the design does result in the site access being unsuitable to serve any additional residential development. And as you will have heard already, the public open space to the southwestern corner effectively functions as a drainage feature as well as open space. In terms of minimum distances between rear-facing elevations of the proposed and existing dwellings, that's around 22.5 metres and therefore complies with the adopted distances in the supplementary planning document. And finally, we've reported 17 additional letters of objection that we've received, and again we've just clarified the point about the local wildlife site. Nailsea Town Council have reiterated their opposition to the proposal, and our recommendation, as I say, remains one of approval, but with a minor change to Part A of the recommendation, reflecting the need for the Habitats Regulations Assessment to be completed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Roger, for that very comprehensive report. I will now invite Councillor Andy Cole to speak to the application and make the proposal.
Thank you,
Andy.
Chairman. Thank you. There have been numerous attempts to reclassify the strategic gap to greenbelt status over many years in order to protect the valley between Nailsea and Backwell. And equally, there have been many assurances from officers that the gap status was robust enough to prevent housing development. Yet we have this application before us. When looking at the plans, to me, the open road surface at the hammerhead appears equally wide as the entrance at the pairings. So, if a recycling vehicle can now safely access the site, then equally, it could access the hammerhead to other potential sites in the future. For me, the bottom line is, approval of this application opens the door for further development in the gap. Further erosion of the landscape. Policies CS19 and SA7 seek to protect strategic gaps, to retain separate identities and protect landscapes. And I will move refusal on those policy grounds. I think the application is contrary to CS19 and SA7, and I wait to see if there's a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Shopland, thank you. Councillor Cherry as well. Do you want to speak to it at all, Councillor Shopland?
Just to support Councillor Cole and to say I'm getting fed up with odd little bits of land being pinched here and there, which gradually make up a whole concept of the countryside change. It's just not stealing by default, but it's obtaining extra houses and spoiling the countryside by default. So I support Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Councillor Shopland. Richard.
Chairman, thank you. Just a couple of points. As you'll have seen from the report, policy CS31 of the core strategy does allow for development on the edge of the settlement, on the edge of the town, of up to 50 dwellings, subject to certain criteria. So in terms of policy, the principle of development adjacent to settlement is acceptable. In addition to that, we need to weigh in the balance the fact that we've got a 5-year housing shortfall. So that does mean the need for housing does weigh more heavily in the balance than it might otherwise do so. So I think it's important to come at it from that direction. The other thing I would urge you just to reflect on is that the impact on the gap, there are a number of criteria that have to be applied, and there are 3 elements which are set out in the report, and the application has been assessed against those. And as Roger Wilmot pointed out, the impact on the gap is, at the end of the day, insignificant, and therefore we feel doesn't carry overriding impact in the determination. So I think please bear in mind that the policy position is supportive in principle of development on the edge of the settlement, regardless of the 5-year supply shortfall.
Thank you for that, Richard. We'll open the debate now. Councillor Westwood, I think you wanted to start off.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah. Straightforwardly, just a question. Roger referred to, I think it was 3 other developments that have occurred or have got permission nearby. Are they also within the strategic gap? No, thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Sorry, Chairman. I don't believe that any of those, certainly the Engine Lane one, and I think the Uplands, neither of those form within the strategic gap. But bear with me just for a second.
Nor was the Youngwood Lane one, Roger.
Yeah.
It was in Nailsea Town Council's strategic gap, but not North Somerset's.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. I've looked long and hard at this application, and being somebody who doesn't live in Nailsea, I could easily be accused of not... Sorry, I'm getting feedback on this. I will take my hearing aids out. That's... You can now hear me, but I can't hear you, so, which may or may not be a good... Chairman, I don't live in Nailsea, I live in Weston, and therefore I am disinterested in this. I use that word intentionally, disinterested. So I've tried to look at it from both sides, as obviously we hope everybody is doing, and I can't accept the multiple reasons people are putting forward for refusal. The only issue that is concerning me is the potential cumulative loss of land in the strategic gap. It's all very well saying this is only a 1% loss, but if it's in a designated strategic gap, it is therefore a reason, and that reason is presumably not to countenance development. So if you, as Councillor Shopland intimated, if you nibble away at it 1% at a time, you end up with what percentage in the long run? I don't know the answer to that question. It is, in the great scheme of things, a very small development. It is arguably inconsequential. And I can see every reason why we would have difficulty defending a refusal on an appeal. But I would need to be convinced that there will be no cumulative loss of the strategic open space. If I could be guaranteed that loss would not occur, then I would put my hand up in favour of this development. If I could not be guaranteed, I would have difficulty supporting it. Chairman.
Thank you, John. Richard.
Chairman, yes, so it is a case of a reapplication on its merits, but as you'll have seen from the committee report, we've set out the tests against which the application should be considered in terms of the impact on the gaps. So on page 19 of the papers, it's the open or undeveloped character of the gap should not be significantly adversely affected. And we're saying, because of the reasons you've given, that because it's a small development, it doesn't significantly adverse affect it. Secondly, that the separate identity and character of the settlements would not be harmed. And again, we've explained why that wouldn't be the case here. And thirdly, that the landscape setting of the settlements wouldn't be harmed. So in all three respects, this development complies with that policy approach. In terms of what might happen in the future, then that is a case to be determined at that time. You'd have the power to consider any future applications in the gap and assess those applications against these same criteria. The scheme hasn't been designed in a way that we think would automatically facilitate access from this development, and even if it did, you could control that at the time. So I think you do need to consider this application on its merits. It's a scheme that falls within CS31 tolerances, and the impact on the gap has been assessed accordingly, and we do have that 5-year supply point. So those are all things that you do have to take into account.
Thank you, Richard. Before I go on to Councillor Solomon, one question I've got. Does the strategic gap have any legal standing? Richard.
It's a policy designation rather than a statutory designation. So something like an area of outstanding natural beauty does have statutory force behind it, as does a national park, but a strategic gap is our designation through the local plan. So it doesn't have statutory force in that sense.
Thank you. Councillor Solomon.
Yes, hello. I share Councillor Crockford-Hawley's concerns about just taking away 1% of the strategic gap. I also am concerned that when objections are coming through, that they're coming through with accurate information, in as much as we're being told, oh, we're taking up the whole of the strategic gap, when in fact we're not. We're talking about 1%, which I know is an important factor. The other thing is, it said we're only talking about 14 houses. That won't, a minimal effect on North Somerset. But if we've got 100 developments with 14 houses, that's a lot of houses we're building, and we're trying to move away from huge developments where houses are all built the same. So we are looking to build smaller development. That being said, I also have concerns. I quite like the development. It looks quite sympathetic to me, and I've come along here with a very open mind. Again, I don't live in the area. I know the area well, but to me, it's a difficult decision to make.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Bridger.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I had two concerns about this. One, the same as everyone else, really, the strategic gap. I mean, my understanding is that if we were to, you encroach into the strategic gap in exceptional circumstances. If there's a community benefit, for example, a desperately needed medical centre or something like that. This, in my view, isn't exceptional circumstances. So unless we change our policy, which we may decide to do through the local plan process, the current local plan, this is against policy, and I think that's it'll be wrong to go against that in this particular case. I have another concern, which I visited the site actually before. I visited it twice, but most recently on Tuesday for a bit longer than my previous visit, and was speaking to a local resident. And I have a bit of a concern actually about road safety in this particular location, because whilst I was speaking to that resident, there wasn't an awful lot of traffic. There were maybe half a dozen cars, but 2 of them came over the brow of the hill really fast at this particular location. So I do have a concern about road safety and access at that particular point of that particular location on the pairings as well. But I think my primary objection would be to, as others have commented, this piecemeal nibbling away at the strategic gap whilst it's still in our policy not to be doing things like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Shopland. Could you put your microphone on, please, David?
First a question, Mr. Chairman. Is policy a legal directive or is it purely a recommendation?
So, Chairman, adopted development plan policy is the starting point for making your decision. So does the proposal comply with the development plan? And if it doesn't, are there material considerations which indicate that you can make an exception? In this case, the core strategy does allow for up to 50 houses on the edge of the settlement, and the gap policy is as set out in the papers. It's not quite as Councillor Bridges summarised it. There are the 3 elements which you have to take into account, and those are addressed in the report. It is open to you to make an exception to policy if there are material indications which indicate otherwise. The need for housing can be one of those, or is one of those, in this instance.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's guidance as to the way we might choose to go. But look, the officer made a statement that this development allowed no further development be added to it. But looking at it now, in the bottom left-hand corner, there is a spur road. Now, they didn't put that in for love. That is put in one day in the hope it's going to lead somewhere. And we're back to Councillor Crockford-Hawley and what I said. We are going to lose a lot of areas, Brookfield Walk included, by stealthy negotiations behind the scene.
Thank you. James, would you like to answer that one, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Shall I answer the one about the hammerhead first? Yeah. So that's been designed so that a refuse vehicle can turn around, so it drives forward into one of the parts of the hammerhead, then it reverses back into the other, and then it leaves the site in a forward gear. So that's the reason it's that shape. If it was only an L shape, that wouldn't permit it to turn around. Does that make sense?
It's plausible, but it still doesn't stop it from being exploited and extended.
Okay.
Could you mention about the current road width with regard to any extension of development?
Yes, okay. So the initial design of this site was included shared surface all the way across the site, so no footway, just a roadway, and the pedestrians are supposed to go in the roadway.
Yeah, I hate to say this, Mr. Chairman, but it takes me back to a development on the Titan Ladder Company development in Yatton, where we put in very narrow roads for convenience.
So we didn't consider it acceptable. We in our highways design development guide, which has been mentioned, shared surface is allowed for up to 25 dwellings. So this is 14 dwellings, so it's well within on the numbers, but it does just go over the 100-metre length for shared surface. It's about 125 metres. So we weren't satisfied that shared surface was appropriate. So within the constraints of the design, the developer has put a curbed footway along the northern side of 1.2 metres wide in length, which is a narrow footway. It's wide enough for somebody pushing a pushchair to pass another adult, but it's certainly not suitable if you were going to have more properties accessed via this development. If that was the case, we would expect a footway on both sides the road. Shall I move on to the road safety aspect, or are there more questions on the width?
I think that covers it pretty much.
Yep, so the road safety aspect, an audit was carried out in March 2021. It hasn't raised any issues with visibility at the access. That meets the standards. And there are no significant traffic accidents in the last 10 years. In addition, there is another junction almost opposite, so vehicles will be expecting movements coming out from that junction, so it's not like a straight section with no accesses and then suddenly a new access appears. So we do consider the visibility acceptable. The tracking has been carried out for a waste vehicle, and that is also acceptable. Was there anything else on the road safety aspect? Okay, thank you.
Does that cover it for you, David?
I said it's plausible, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Would you like to turn your microphone off, please?
Sorry.
Councillor McWilliam.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm in a similar position to Councillor Crockford-Hawley, although based on the discussion so far, I understand the concerns. I attended a site visit, but I'm finding it difficult to refuse this application as based on the evidence given so far, we have followed our own policies to the letter. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Solomon. Oh, sorry. Councillor Harley.
How could you forget me up here, Chairman?
I'm really, really sorry.
Yeah, actually, it's just, I would like some clarification, if I may. I think it was Richard who said that, if it went to an appeal, we would lose because of our housing. We haven't reached our housing stock. Now, this really does concern me because whatever happens, it's going to take us probably a long time to reach our housing stock. So anybody that may have, objections and valid objections, as these people have, and they live in it, we don't. And the concern that was raised by the highways gentleman, it seems to me before you find a highway hazard, somebody has to be killed. And that is something that I find absolutely atrocious. So I think nobody knows the area better than the people who live there. And if we're looking at applications all the time whereby, it won't be accepted in an appeal because we haven't reached our housing stock, I think we're really on a losing wicket, quite frankly.
Thank you, Anne. Any other? Councillor Cherry.
Thank you very much. I too have concerns about the strategic gap, and I do see it as being something that's being nibbled away at. And even though we're told it's only 1%, many of us have concerns that gradually that will build up. Also, having visited the site and spoken with local residents, they have severe concerns about the safety issues about that particular access point. And I don't believe that they're just making that up, especially as we want to encourage active travel, and that particular juncture with the other crossing, they're very concerned about risks to children on bikes. And so the fact that nobody's been injured in 10 years doesn't give me enough security. I agree with Councillor Harley. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Are there any other comments from anybody? Councillor Solomon.
Yes, I'll make it a quick one. I think the one real question we have to ask ourselves on this one is the 1% strategic gap loss. Are we willing to accept that? But that, to my mind, would be my only reason for refusing this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Vice Chairman.
Before we move to the vote, Chairman, I wonder if the proposer could explain in a little more detail how his proposal would be worded such that the officers would find that a defendable position.
Andy? Yes? Did you hear what Councillor Crawford-Hawley said?
I think Councillor Crawford-Hawley did ask a question I was going to ask, which was, please could we just clarify what the reason for refusal is? I think the officer advice is that fear about future development in itself isn't sufficient to warrant refusal. We have explained that the way the planning system works, that if we have a 5-year supply shortfall, the need for housing does weigh in the balance. It might be a small number of houses, but it still weighs in the balance. CS31 does allow for up to 50 houses on the edge of the town, and the impact on the gap is assessed not in terms of the percentage per se, but in terms of the 3 criteria that we've set out in the report, and we feel it does comply with those. It doesn't say you can never have anything in the gap. It says you can have things in the gap, provided these criteria are met.
Well, just to reiterate, my concern is if you allow this application to be approved, there will be potentially a domino effect of more applications in the gap, and that would be catastrophic for the area, catastrophic. And as you said, you can, with further applications, there's no guarantees. So if this one goes through, who knows what will happen to the gap? It will be a disaster for the local community.
Well, we're in summing up. Is it quick? Councillor Westwood.
Yeah, it's just dancing around the strategic gap again, isn't it, basically? What legal status is the fact that it will be building within the strategic gap, is that sufficient and defensible if we decide to turn this down?
Chairman, you have to show what the harm would be against the 3 criteria in the report. So the open or undeveloped character of the gap should not be significantly adversely affected. Secondly, the separate identity and character of the settlements would not be harmed. You'd have to say there would be. And thirdly, you'd have to say the landscape setting of the settlements would be harmed.
Thank you, Chairman. My view is that CS19 and SA7 will be contravened.
Okay.
So I'd support refusal on those 2 policies.
Is that sufficient, Richard? Do you need to know any more?
Sorry, Councillor Cole, could you just repeat the SA7 and CS? Thank you.
Okay. Happy?
Well, Chairman, I've got nothing more to add to what I said.
Okay, thank you. Right. You've heard all the debate on this. Go to the vote. We have a motion which is proposed for refusal of this application, which has been duly seconded. All those in favour of refusal? That's those against? That's carried. Thank you.
Chairman, as that was an item under section 1 of the agenda, it would come back to a subsequent meeting for the decision to be confirmed. It gives the opportunity for the applicant to consider the issues raised.
Thank you, Richard. Right, move on to item 8, which is the another section 1 report, development of the site at B&M Bargains in Clevedon. Again, I'm going to invite Roger Wilmot to present the report. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll start off by just showing the context of the site within the wider Clevedon area. So we have the triangle Station Road loops around here, Ken Road, Moor Lane out towards the motorway interchange, and then to the south of the site, Great Western Road, which loops around to link up with Old Church Road. And the site, broadly speaking, lies underneath the E of Clevedon here. So we've got the car park, existing car park here, the main B&M Bargains building here, and the further area of the car park that extends out towards Lower Church Road, Lower Queens Road, sorry, I'll get it right in a moment, here. And then there's the walkway through, which leads through into Queen Square, which adjoins Station Road. That shows the site in rather more detail. As you'll see, the application focuses on the red outlined site. The blue outlined area is also within the applicant's control. And again, this shows in a little bit more detail the existing main store, which was originally built for Safeway supermarkets, became Morrison's at a later point, and now occupied by B&M Bargains. We've got the service area around to the rear. The main car park stretches right the way round here and is seen from Great Western Road right the way along this boundary, as this is pretty much open to view, apart from a number of mature trees located in this area here. Again, just focusing on the proposals in front of you, we've got a proposal for 39 unit C3 dwellings here for age-restricted purposes, so it's for occupiers aged 60 and above and partners aged 55 and above. As I say, there are 39 units with parking arranged around the apartment block in this area, access from Lower Queens Road here, and an area of private open space within the L shape of the block here. And what was originally shown as a row of new tree planting along the Great Western Road frontage, we'll come back to that point in a moment or two. And then a reduced area of car parking, which now covers this area here. At the southern tip of the site, there is a proposed A3 food and drink outlet here. And then as the main part, as far as the sort of retailing and the town centre elements are concerned, a proposal to split what's currently the B&M Bargains unit into 2 retail units with a new gymnasium at first floor level. You'll also see there are some proposals for changing in terms of access, so adopting a single point of access here, new pedestrian route through along here leading towards Queen Square, and generally some improvements within the car park to facilitate a better experience and better access for pedestrians to the area. Just moving on, an indication of the current south elevation and west elevation, which were pretty much as they were designed and built in the 1980s. Those reflect, I think, the desire at the time to accommodate what was seen as a fairly large supermarket for Clevedon. So very little in the way of an appealing facade facing Great Western Way. It's pretty much all blank, apart from a few sort of personnel doors dotted within an otherwise blank brick facade. And along the west elevation leading towards Queen Square, again, sort of a fairly dull facade underneath the canopy there. Moving on just to the proposals and some details of those. So from the north elevation, so looking down from Queen Square, you can see the proposed apartment block here, with in the foreground the outline of the properties in Lower Queens Road here, so you can gauge an idea of the respective heights of the existing and proposed blocks in that area. You can see just an indication here of the church in Queen Square, and then a view through to the proposed elevations on the Queen Square side of the B&M Bargains building here. From the east elevation, an indication again where the gymnasium would be located at first floor level, and you'll see the proposed A3 food and drink unit, which is located down here on the site plan, and that, as we'll see later, just gives a nod towards some of the railway architecture that represents a little of the history of the site. Again, a couple of other views of this. So in terms of the west elevation, so this is looking really from the apartment block and Lower Queens Road towards the B&M Bargains building. Again, at first floor level, you'll see the gymnasium. This has been substantially redesigned since the original application, and in our view is a much more appropriate treatment of that, given the nature of the site and the nature of the surroundings. And the proposal is that there will be a more active frontage along here with a refurbished elevations and attractive materials along the facades here. Again, to the right, when viewed from this direction, you can see the A3 food and drink unit. In terms of the south elevation, this is effectively seen from Great Western Road. You'll see existing dwellings and buildings at the corner of Lower Church Road, with a gap where the parking area is at the top end of the site, and then the apartment block here with the pedestrian access leading across and through the site at this point, and just the edge of the B&M Bargains building here, which effectively joins on to what you see below. So again, from the point of view of Great Western Road, a much more lively elevation with windows in there and main entrance point just up here, which will be visible from Great Western Road. Just an indication of the A3 food and drink unit, again I think loosely designed upon the engine shed type architecture that might have been seen in that area before the 1980s retail redevelopment. Just a slightly more detailed version of this. This is the amended plan, and now shows the potential for the 3 of the mature trees to be retained. So the applicants have responded to our request on that, and this now also shows a I think it's 1.1 or 1.2 metre high stone boundary wall to be erected along this side to give a bit more sense of enclosure and privacy, particularly to the private garden area for the apartments. There is a point concerning, as you'll see in a moment, concerning another mature tree in this area, which the applicant has indicated would result in the loss of 3 parking spaces. I'm advised that in terms of the apartment block is not going to be a material issue from our point of view to lose those. Those can still be compensated for within the larger car park area. Again, you'll see an indication of the car park layout that would result from this, and the route through to Queen Square through here. The entrance to the retail unit being at this point here at the corner of the building. Okay, so just try and run quickly through the update sheet just to highlight particular points on that. I've just mentioned about the retention of the northernmost poplar tree, that would result in the loss of 3 parking spaces. The applicant has suggested that a condition requiring further technical work to use best endeavours to retain that without the loss of spaces might take place. As I say, I think from our point of view, I think we feel that the loss of those 3 parking spaces can be accommodated or absorbed within the main car park, which hopefully would enable retention of that tree, which is one of a group that does make a significant impact and statement in terms of softening views of the centre from Great Western Road. They've explained that in terms of the residential building, the apartment block can't be relocated due to underground services. And again, they've suggested that a condition be applied to assess whether trees could be retained or replaced with suitable trees in better positions. And that is a point which has proved to be, I think, a significant constraint on the development of the site, because effectively there is a culverted river that passes under part of the site. There are also some fairly significant services that underlie parts, and where I think in an ideal world we'd have said it would be nice to see a greater sense of enclosure and potential for street scenes to be created. They do represent some significant constraints on the potential to do that. We've included some comments from our arboricultural officer on the update sheet, and I think we accept the point that in terms of carrying out some further improvements to the coherence, particularly of some of the areas such as the turning head in Lower Queen's Road, there's a possibility, I think, for further discussion that could result in other improvements in that location. In terms of the amended plans, just to confirm, the apartments will meet the nationally described space standards and policy DM42 in terms of disability access. You'll see, perhaps maybe of some interest to you as well, that we've included comments from the trustees of the Curzon Clevedon Community Centre for Arts and the Clevedon BID, both of whom support, in the case of the BID, conditionally upon the proposed Section 106 contribution towards enhancing Queen Square, but essentially support for the proposal. They think that, respectively, that concerns over the connection with the Curzon and the Cultural Quarter is potentially enhanced by these proposals, and the Clevedon BID, I think, very definitely see it as an opportunity and welcome effectively investment in the town centre at a time where clearly retailing in particular is suffering. In terms of the reference to viability, as you will have noted from the report, the applicants have indicated that they don't consider that the scheme can support any affordable housing contribution, although they have proposed contribution towards enhancing Queen Square. We have recently received an initial report on viability, but that is something that we're still going through and seeking further advice on. So that still effectively is the same position that we're in as on the original agenda paper sheets, which is that we still need to look at that, and the recommendation of approval is subject to that. And finally, we've just clarified in terms of our views that we've given consideration to the application of listed building and conservation area legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Again, very comprehensive. Thank you. I'll now call upon Councillor Mark Crosby, who will, what's he going to do? Speak to the proposal and come up with speak to the application and come up with a proposal. I'll get it right in a minute.
Thank you, Chair.
Mark.
Thank you. Members may recall that I subbed to this committee about 12 months ago when McCarthy and Stone wanted to build another care facility and retirement home in Clevedon. And at the time, yet another care and retirement home, Poets Muse, had just been opened. You will recall, if you were attending at that point, that members overturned the officer's recommendation on a number of grounds, including the then appalling design of the building and the impact that it would have overlooking and overshadowing adjacent neighbours. The committee subsequently approved the application while setting a number of conditions, good conditions, aimed at the overlapping and shadowing issues. It will come as no surprise that the applicant then challenged the proposed amendments and increased the number of units. Today, Clevedon is faced with the prospect of yet another age-restricted residential development. Can I underline, I do not have an in-principle objection with respect to the proposed retail-led aspects of this scheme. However, my core concerns are focused on the inclusion of the age-restricted accommodation block and its potentially wider strategic impacts. According to the 2000, and I've repeated, this is another time I've repeated this. According to the 2011 National Census, Clevedon has the 3 oldest wards in the district in terms of average age. If you look at the 2011 census, it revealed that in Clevedon, 0 to 4-year-olds were down by 13.8%, 5 to 18-year-olds were down by 11.4%. The percentage of 19 to 26-year-olds had not increased at all over the decade. 27 to 35-year-olds, those are our new nesters, were down 20.2%. 36 to 49-year-olds were down by 2.9%, but the 50 to 64-year-olds, of which I'm one, were up 14.4%, and the 65 pluses were up 16.1%. Now, each time that I have been faced with this situation, I have been told that we should turn to our policies in terms of sustained, mixed and balanced communities. So if I turn to DM34, which states, the housing mix and type proposed should be justified in the planning application through the design and access statement, is it? Or similar documents, and should demonstrate how it meets local needs with reference to the latest strategic housing market needs assessment. Again, is it? Or local needs survey. The proposed development should help address any identified imbalance in the existing local housing stock, meet the needs of local residents, and contribute positively to the promotion of sustainable, inclusive communities. As stated, a key fundamental part of this application is for the construction of more age-restricted accommodation. Policy DM40 also highlights concerns regarding the potential impact of increased in-migration of older people, stating an over-provision of care homes which would increase in-migration of the 65-plus age group would not be supported. The strategic housing market assessment will form the evidence base for assessing need for retirement and supported independent living schemes. I haven't seen that evidence at this point. Policy CS15, good policy. The Council will seek to ensure a genuine mix of house types within existing and future communities in North Somerset through considering proposals for developments in terms of the extent to which they, A, contribute to a well-integrated mix of housing types and tenures to support a range of household sizes, ages and incomes to meet identified housing needs. B, reduce an existing of one housing type within an area through encouraging the development of a range of housing types that meet housing needs, contribute to an improved local environment and so forth. Yet despite all these policies, there again appears to be little resistance offered to applicants seeking to build very expensive private healthcare and age-restricted accommodation in Clevedon. None of which, since 2007 I've calculated, has adequately met the Council's Section 106 demands for affordable housing provision, and this latest one is no different. The applicants propose that the only means of delivering the new retail scheme, which I support, is to remove 46% of the car park spaces. Can anyone provide me with compelling evidence of how removing 46% of the town's principal retail car park makes good commercial sense and will enhance its appeal as a shopping destination. I don't see anything from the applicant, and to be honest, a little more in the officer's report that provides compelling evidence for that position. So let's turn again to adopted policies. Car parking. Core Vision 10 seeks to ensure that sufficient parking is provided in new developments to meet the needs of users in a safe and well-designed environment, while public parking in town, district and local centres contributes to their continued vitality. CS11, the quality and quantity of town centre parking is vital to maintaining and increasing the attractiveness of our town centres. DM29, any net resulting increase in on-street parking would not unacceptably harm the character of the area, highway safety or the effective operation of the surrounding highway network, and the location has good other access to other means of travel other than the private car. Anyone who knows Clevedon Town Centre will be aware that it does not benefit from good access to other means of travel other than the car. On-street parking is a continuous problem throughout the town centre. The policy goes on to state that under provision of car parking can be replaced with park and ride or multi-storey spaces. Where and how are you going to do that in Clevedon? So the community benefits, it goes on to say again, or that the community benefits arising from the development outweigh the harm from the loss of car parking spaces. What community benefits? Some 800 people registered their views on this application, with the vast majority seeing very little community benefit. Whilst DM29 acknowledges the need that alternatives to the private car are available wherever possible, it also highlights traditional shopping and employment centres need sufficient parking to ensure their vitality and viability in the face of out-of-centre competition. DM60, I'm sorry I'm going on with these, but there seems to be a lot. The quality and quantity of town centre parking is vital to maintaining and increasing the attractiveness of our town centre. Finally, on that particular one, it acknowledges a number of development enhancements that would generally attract planning support in these circumstances, but it also includes two key cautionary points, in that future proposals must retain or increase the amount and quality of public car parking spaces and do not adversely impact on the role and function of the town centre. I could go on. It is my view that an application to reduce the car parking capacity of Clevedon's principal retail and economic centre by 46% is a direct threat to its continued vitality and vibrancy. Finally, one final word on that from policy DM29. Sustainable development requires that alternatives to the private car are available wherever possible. However, traditional shopping and employment centres need sufficient parking to ensure their vitality and viability in the face of out-of-centre competition. Officers use the same policies, but reach different conclusions. So sometimes planning and planning policy is a bit like you say tomato and I say tomato. But there we go. Section 106, this is the bit that really makes me angry. The applicant states that they will not make any Section 106 contributions towards affordable housing within their development, nor as an off-site contribution. As usual, it's nothing. They all do nothing. Not even 1 or 2 single occupier units in the new block. I know that a viability appraisal has been prepared by the applicant, and I'd really love to see it, and so I'm sure would members of this committee. Instead, the applicant has suggested that they make a £100,000 contribution towards improvements to Queen Square, the majority of which is owned by North Somerset Council. Clevedon bids, and I noted Roger's reference to it, Clevedon bids support for this redevelopment is conditional on those works being done now as part of this scheme. But the proposals for the Queen Square element are loosely attached to a future phase 2 development. They may or may not happen. They're not linked to this. It's just a blue line proposal that they've put up at this stage. There is nothing with respect to the current application which conditions those works to be carried out. Have officers met with the applicant to discuss that particular issue and to agree the composition and signing of a Grampian condition linked to it? Members are aware that officers have recommended that the application is approved, subject to a number of core conditions. In my view, there are too many outstanding issues to merit approval at this stage. They include the completion of the assessment regarding the applicant's development viability appraisal and the completion of a Section 106 agreement towards affordable housing provision. The presentation of plans to demonstrate the retention and protection of the trees at the boundary with Great Western Road, and I appreciate, Roger, that you've raised that in part. Proposals to protect the privacy of ground floor apartment occupiers within the age-restricted residential scheme. I don't know if that's still part of it. Further assessment and confirmation and design of the vehicle access to Great Western Road and the turning head at Lower Queens Road. I would like to add to that list that a panel of elected members is composed to work closely in partnership with the officers in order to further scrutinise key aspects of this application, that further consideration is given by that steering group to the degree to which this application meets the objectives and aspirations set out in DM34 and other associated policies, that further scrutiny is given to the impact that such a significant loss of off-street parking will have, particularly with respect to its potential impact on the town centre's retail offer. There is a good deal more else that could be drawn into those discussions. I note that the final decision with respect to this application and the key conditions must be agreed in consultation with the chairman, vice chairman and ward member. Did you know that, David? I would ask that the steering group is encompassed within that process. And for the reasons, accordingly, for the reasons that I've given, which I hope others share, I would ask that the recommended decision is deferred back to this committee, obviously, but prior to that, that the councillors, town councillors and other stakeholders have the opportunity to participate in further examination of the application. And can I say that we councillors have had one meeting with Roger and his team during this period, and we had a presentation last week from the applicant. That's what we've had. So, can I recommend, or my recommendation would be, that we defer this application for further scrutiny, and I would say it should be deferred for at least 2 committee cycles, not 1, and for a site visit. Come and look at it, members. It's hugely important to the 800 plus people that said, this is not good. Now, they weren't saying it's not good because they didn't want to see decent shopping and so on and so forth. They were saying, the majority of them from this old town I come with, there's too much of this already. There is too much age-restricted housing. Thank you, Chair.
Phew. Thanks for that, Mark.
That's all right.
Does that proposal find a seconder? One or 2 of them. That's good. Okay. Richard, do you want to speak?
Sorry, Chairman. Sorry, can I just say something here?
Yeah.
Surely, and correct me if I'm totally wrong, should we not go for refusal and not deferral?
The reason that I didn't go for that, Councillor Harvey, was that under the cooling off rules, we would only get one committee cycle before having to revisit that decision. I'm proposing to members that perhaps that we look for, as I say, a minimum 2 committee cycle, 3 committee cycles to deal with this.
Point of clarification, Chair, if I may. Point of clarification. I mean, this seems to be a classic placemaking issue, to be honest. And in support of what Councillor Crosby is saying, this seems to be, Weston has a placemaking strategy. Porter said, I know there's some high-level meetings. I think possibly that might have started in Clevedon, but this is proposed. An applicant, not the council or residents, is proposing here quite a, really big change, substantial change to the centre of, a major town in the district, and you need to bring people along with you on that. And I feel that the council need to take back control of this. It's a placemaking issue, and so I would support what Mark is saying there in terms of whether it's a committee, but it feels wrong that a single applicant can land this on a town and propose a substantial change to the centre of the town when there isn't really much of a strategy behind it. That I can see. I might be wrong.
Thank you, Steve. Richard, what's the feasibility?
Chairman, the application has been brought forward to you to consider and make a decision as to how you want to progress, and it is open to you to approve it or refuse it or defer it if you think there's sound reasons for those latter courses of action. In terms of wider engagement and involvement of member working groups, that is plausible, although clearly the final decision does rest with this committee. We don't have subcommittees per se, so whilst we can involve local members and have look at the details again in more detail, ultimately it will need to come back to this committee for this committee to decide, and it's not we don't have a Clevedon Town Council subcommittee, and it can't just be for Clevedon to decide. But perhaps before I do, I'll just perhaps ask Roger to comment on some of the points that we made about housing policy, and James on the car parking, just briefly, please. Roger.
Thank you, Richard. There was there was a lot of points raised in that presentation by Councillor Crosby about the application. It's one that's been, as you see, has been on our books for a considerable period of time, and we have been through a lengthy process, I think, of trying to engage at an earlier stage with potential sort of placemaking exercises and looking at how this sits in a wider sense within the town centre. We have had discussions about alternative uses and the potential for a different housing solution than the one that's been proposed. At the end of the day, however, some early discussions and contacts with potentially an alternative, I suppose, participant in the development didn't really proceed anywhere, and it became evident that in the applicant's view, the proposed end user for the apartment block was absolutely crucial to seeing the scheme through and starting it off, and effectively creating a platform for this first phase, and then this phase potentially providing a platform for a second phase of development in the remaining group of shops. So we have spent some significant amount of time, in fact, on looking over the proposals. With the input of the design review panel, we have secured, I think, some fairly significant improvements in terms of the apartment blocks to the scale of that block. That's been reduced. We think we've achieved a significant improvement in terms of the elevational treatment of that, and certainly one that we think is far more appropriate to the centre of Clevedon and the conservation area than it was originally. And I think we feel we've also achieved some significant improvements, particularly in terms of the B&M Bargains building, aesthetically and in terms of the way that that addresses Great Western Road. So a number of plus points that we think we've secured from that. That's not to say, however, that we do accept and think that there were further improvements that we would have liked to have discussed and perhaps been able to go further, but the applicant had sort of indicated that having made various amendments, most recently, as I say, matters such as the retention of at least 3 of the mature trees, the introduction of the stone boundary wall enclosure, that they were unable to make any further improvements or proposals to accommodate our sort of suggestions on that. So there have been quite a lot of things that have gone on in that respect. We have also looked over the issue of the local housing market and in particular demographics in Clevedon, and certainly from the investigations that we'd carried out, we didn't find any significant evidence that there were real concerns, for example, over the future of local schools in terms of school roles and so on. And you know, I think that there is room certainly for further discussion over things like the housing market and what contribution developments like this and the nature of the apartment block, whether those do indeed do what the applicant claims, which is that they will improve the local housing market by effectively allowing downsizing to take place and thereby releasing family housing within the existing Clevedon area. I think that's a matter potentially we probably could investigate and see whether there's anybody else that's or any other parties that are able to cast light on that particular issue. In terms of the viability, as I say, we do have our concerns because clearly affordable housing is very important to us, and that forms part of our policy, and I think we would be very reluctant to concede that point. But there are clearly some issues which appear to be arising as a result of our policies, at least in terms of what the preliminary conclusions of that seem to be. We do, I hasten to add, we do want to look at that and take further advice on that particular issue, though. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Roger. We'll go to the debate. Councillor Westwood.
Yep, thank you, Chairman. I'll speak to second this. Those of us who took part in the Bristol airport expansion decision were given a masterclass in our duties and the possibilities of balance within planning decisions. We do have policies to call on to put in both sides of the balance, as Councillor Crosby has pointed out. We had 5 training sessions altogether as far as the airport decision was concerned, 2 sessions of which were generic in their nature on planning decisions and planning decision making. We were told that we're the political representatives with a small p and are there to partially at least reflect the views and wishes of our local population. It's worth pointing out that Clevedon Town Council, Clevedon Civic Society, no mugs them basically as far as this kind of thing's concerned, and a huge proportion of residents of 800 odd responses were overwhelmingly against this proposal. And it wasn't so much, it's not so much the retail area that they're worried about, it's the block of elderly persons housing that is going to be put in the corner of the car park if this goes through. I don't know whether you've seen it, but the applicant sent an illustrated extra pack out recently. It had some carefully chosen views and perspectives, in my opinion. It reminded me of the Monty Python sketch with the giant hedgehog, Spiny Norman, trying to hide himself away behind smaller buildings, but unfortunately looming overall. I think we need to look at this site, and I would certainly, in seconding it, suggest that we go along as a committee on a Thursday morning so we can see just how busy that car park can be. And I very much welcome what Councillor Crosby said about getting some further investigation into all aspects of this scheme. I listened very carefully to what Roger said, and working through that, I can see that although the officers may have recommended approval, as it were, there would appear to be reservations, to say the least. So, I take great pleasure in seconding Councillor Crosby on this one.
Thank you, Richard. Could you switch your microphone off, please?
Will do.
Thank you. Councillor Shopland.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to seek your advice. Am I allowed to move an amendment for refusal?
Depends what the amendment is, Sue.
So I'm allowed to move an amendment for refusal, am I?
No.
Right, thank you very much. Well, Mr. Chairman, first, it may be that...
Councillor Shopman, although you can, the motion at the moment is Councillor Crosby's that's here, and it's been seconded, and it's a matter for you, Chairman, in terms of discretion. But if that amendment is in opposition to the proposal, then you wouldn't.
Chairman, surely in direct opposition it would be for approval. This is not a direct opposing amendment. I would contend that you have every right to oppose it.
Okay.
Chairman, we can hear the proposal.
Yeah, we can hear the proposal. Yeah, if you'd like to make the proposal, and then if it finds a seconder, then we'll go through Councillor Crosby's proposal, and then vote on that, and then when that's voted on, we'll see what yours comes out at. Is that how you look at it?
No.
Depends on wording. Would you like to propose it anyway?
Right, so the amendment at the moment is not allowed?
Yes. Carry on.
It is or it isn't?
It is.
I'm sorry, can't hear you.
Mr. Chairman, if it is allowed, I will move an amendment that it be refused. But before I do that, I feel that I have to satisfy a thought in some members' minds that I may have an interest in
Chairman,
part
on
of
point
this
of
proposal.
procedure, if an amendment has been put, you have to seek a seconder.
Well, I'm waiting
Have I
to
a
see what the
seconder, Mr.
amendment
Chairman?
is.
For refusal. He's a good chap, the Councillor Cole. Mr. Chairman, I have to declare a slight interest in it. It's not pecuniary, but I want to make sure that people understand I am not a member of the MOG Club. Now, if I may just explain what the MOG Club is, it's the miserable old gits. All right? I am a rejuvenated second-generation teenager out to cause mayhem. So as long as I've got no interest in the old people's home. Because the thing is in this, that if we seek deferral, it is very much like going out with a white flag when you know you have an indefensible position. And you know that in the end, you are going to lose. Because Clevedon, and Councillor Crosby has put the case very well, is utterly opposed to an old people's home on the site. But the developer has said in negotiations that the scheme cannot go ahead unless there is a housing development on the site. So there is no room for negotiation there, Mr. Chairman. It's either all or nothing. The car parking issue is, I agree with, it's been explained. Despite what we read in the local North Somerset Times about a revitalised bus service, people are never in the immediate future going to give up private transport, whatever it might be, and they will require somewhere to put it. And you know, Mr. Chairman, and every councillor here knows, that at a council meeting quite recently, there were adverse proposals for car parking in Clevedon. I can't say any more, it was an exempt item, and I don't want you to suspend standing orders. But parking in the centre of the triangle of Clevedon is under threat in all directions. I am told it's a private car park. I am a landowner, and I am told that if the public have used my land unobstructed for 20 years, they have a right of entry. This car park has been used without restrictions, without gates, without limits for over 20 years. So therefore, is there a legal precedent for it to be a public car park? And the public have access to it? I think there might be. So the private car parking falls by the wayside. Clevedon cannot survive, or the triangle cannot survive without this car park. You might as well shut every shop if you do it. And therefore, Mr. Chairman, being very simple and putting it, I will move refusal, because there is no scope for negotiations with this firm on any alteration to the housing issue. They have said so. So we know that before we start. I move refusal, Mr. Chairman.
Does that find a second? Thank you, Andy. Okay, so Councillor Crosby, do you accept that alteration?
No, sorry, David, no.
Or the amendment, sorry?
No, because as I have no great love or affection for much of what I've been discussing in relation to the housing element, but this red line at the moment encompasses all of the bulk of the shopping area as well. And to simply say no on the basis that it will come back in a month and we'll try and say no again is not good planning. It's not good preparation in any way. I still believe that to defer still presents us with the opportunity to refuse at a later date, and it provides us with the opportunity to ask for more information where it's needed and to enhance our own understanding as we progress towards that point in the future when we may say, I say you say because I'm just a sub, when we may say refuse. We still have that option. To refuse now presents us with no options.
Chairman, I propose the vote on the amendment be now put.
Sorry, could you say that again?
I propose the vote on the amendment be now put.
Okay.
Without further debate.
You happy to second that? Yeah. Or do you want to speak? Okay.
Which is pertinent to what the Vice Chairman's just said. Councillor Shopland has come forward with a straightforward view that the parking is, or the lack of parking, or alteration in parking is sufficient.
You've got to get a seconder.
I was allowed Vice Chairman, I was given permission to speak.
Councillors, you can't be heard on the YouTube if you don't have your microphones on.
All right. Have you finished? You've done that?
Am I allowed to continue, Chair?
Well, if
it's very brief.
Go on, very brief.
Very briefly, I don't think the reason that Councillor Shopland's put forward would stand up legally,
okay, well, that's,
as a reason to turn it down.
That's to be seen by a vote. So, what you're recommending, Vice Chairman, is that we go straight to the vote. Thank you. Right. The recommendation is to propose refusal. All those in favour of refusal? Those against refusal? Thank you. And any abstentions? I don't think there are. Okay. Thank you. Right, so we go back to the original proposal. Councillor Crosby. Yeah, go on then.
Thank you very much. I just want to support Councillor Crosby's proposal for referral, simply because there are so many complexities with this particular development, and it profoundly affects Clevedon. And at the moment, we have literally only received aspects supporting the applicant on the heritage assessment literally last week. There has been absolutely minute discussion about this online because it's been during COVID, and it's absolutely vital that we go and re-examine and look at all the evidence, and that's exactly why. So we don't want to just refuse it, we want to go back through everything and look at it again properly. And anyway, I'll let Mark continue. Councillor Crosby, continue. Thank you.
Chairman, are we having a debate on this? I mean, I've put my hand up several times, and I don't think you'll see. I think
No, I don't because of the reflection on it.
Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry, Councillor Harley.
No, I think it's something we need to look at because, you know, it's
I take on board you want to speak. I've got two other speakers before you. Is that all right? Thank you. I'll go to the Vice Chairman now.
Thank you, Chairman. My reason for trying to get over the hurdle of refusal is that we would have spent forever and a day finding reasons to refuse, and we'd have got nowhere. And of course, it would have come back to us. So I think Councillor Crosby's motion is it's a very well-worded motion. His contribution, I thought, was actually riveting. And what I noticed in the officer response was, could I put it carefully, a less than enthusiastic endorsement of the application. And perhaps we all need to be able to reflect more on this particular application and the site and the issues, particularly the car parking issue. I mean, David raised a point earlier about the legalities of the car park. Now, it's not for us at a meeting like this to decide one way or the other on that. That's a legal issue which might or might not become pertinent. I've no way of knowing. The whole issue of enforced positioning of specific aged housing is an interesting one. My great-grandmother went in old age to Clevedon to die and did it very successfully. And Clevedon, like Weston-super-Mare, is that sort of place, isn't it, where people naturally tend to drift in old age to terminate their lives. So I think it would be very advantageous for us to have broader understanding of some of these issues, particularly, I think, in the light of two very well-placed heritage organisations, Clevedon Civic Society, for which I also have a great deal of time, but also the Curzon Trust, people equally interested in the good use of heritage in Clevedon for the enhancement of Clevedon. I think we perhaps need to look a little more at that. So, and could the proposer of the motion manipulate things so that he subs at the subsequent meeting where we discuss this as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Councillor Crosby, I'm going to ask Councillor Harley to speak next, so it will enable you to sum up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's only really supporting it, but I just wondered, actually looking at the report as it's going back for us to look at things, I think it's vitally important, in my opinion, on issue 4, the impact on conservation. And, you know, it said that there will be, in the report, it says there will be some harmful effects on the significance of assets mentioned in the poplar trees and also the dominant effect on the Great Western Road. That was considered sufficiently distant from the Curzon. But I think it's important to take note of what Historic England said on page 39. So we're not going to read through it, but I think with that in the impact on the conservation and the whole paragraph of, or paragraphs, pardon me, on page 39 of what Historic England have said, and I think that's vitally important.
Thank you, Anne. Councillor Shopland. Could you switch your microphone on, please? Could you switch your microphone on, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That we are going to have a 6'8" wall for half of Great Western Road. It won't be quite from the corner, but basically from the corner with Old Church Road to the entrance to the car park, to protect whoever the residents might be in the old people's home. Well, you might as well put a searchlight and some barbed wire on the top, because it would look like Dartmoor Prison. That's not all, Mr. Chairman. They're talking about trees, and then they immediately change it to a 6'8" high stone wall.
Roger, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah,
Could you switch your microphone off, David, please?
Okay, I think it is very important that just to confirm this is not a proposal for an elderly person's home. That was my first point of clarification. They are C3 use class apartments, so they are dwelling houses, but proposed with age restrictions on them. But the second point was, in terms of the boundary wall, which the applicant has now agreed to, that was with the object of trying to create a little more shelter and privacy in terms of the private open space for those apartments. But the height is just over, I think, just over a metre in height. So it's not a sort of 6 foot or higher barrier, which I think we would accept. Probably would create, I think, a rather overbearing effect, probably, for anybody using that private open space with that. There have been some discussions, I think, also about privacy in terms of the path just along here where there are frontages. But again, I think we've accepted that is something that could be discussed and ultimately addressed by condition. It's a relatively modest detail in the full scheme of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Councillor Crosby, would you like to sum up?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Roger, for that. And I think also highlighting the point that this is C3 use class and not C2. And therefore, if it's C3, general residential use and so forth, it is even more important that we hold our ground in relation to Section 106 contributions. I appreciate that those properties that pretend to be hospitals but have nice bistros and cost £6,600 a month, which my friend's mother does, it's great for them. But this is about we hold up our ground on Section 106 contributions for affordable housing. So to that end, could I just confirm that I would ask that the recommended decision is deferred in order for councillors and other stakeholders to participate in further examination of the application, and that a site visit with officers is convened, and that the period of time dedicated to that should be a minimum of 2 committee cycles. Thank you, Chair.
We've heard the proposal, which has been seconded. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour of deferment? It's unanimous, I think, isn't it? Yes. Thank you very much. That's unanimous.
Chair, can I just say, can we have the site meeting on a Thursday morning, please?
Okay.
Which is market day.
Right. Thank you. Okay, on to item 9, a Section 2 report, development of land at Moor Lane, Yatton. I will again invite Roger Wilmot to present the report. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. So I won't spend a great deal of time going through the plans, because I think probably most of you are quite familiar with those now, but very briefly, we've got the application site, the residential allocated site here, which is now the subject of a proposal for 60 dwellings with an access road going through the former orchard and onto Moor Road, which, as many of you will know, is stopped up at the Horse Castle end. Just an indication of the proposed layout from Persimmon Homes superimposed on an aerial photograph of the site. Probably of some significance you might want to just bear in mind, and just for me to highlight, you'll see the perimeter of the existing rugby club ground, which has formed part of the discussion in connection with this application, just here, and the clubhouse, existing clubhouse, just off picture here. Stowey Reen, which has been mentioned, runs along this perimeter here, and the orchard, which contains a small number of remaining trees from its original use, one or more of which is host to a rare fungus which has been mentioned in the past within that, and this area is proposed for additional orchard planting with the proposed play area round about where the cursor is here, and some footpath links to the main access road, which is shown with footway on one side here. Attenuation feature for surface water in this area here. Again, I think just an indication, I'm not going to spend really any significant time on that. It's the layout, again, probably shown in a different form. Some street elevations, which again you will have seen previously, and that's essentially the nature of the proposal. As I say, I think you're probably fairly familiar with that. In terms of the report, the agenda papers set out, I think, the additional information that we've sought and provided in terms of the potential feasibility of an alternative access via the existing rugby club ground. So I won't dwell on that. The details are actually there. We have had, however, some additional information from the applicant, which they show compliance with space standards. They've also stated that they will deliver the 15% renewables of 15% of the predicted energy requirements of the dwellings. And as you'll see, they have also sought clarification of the proposed refusal reason that was approved at the last committee when this was considered, which was in relation to policies DM36 and policy CS14, which respectively relate to density matters and the distribution of housing within North Somerset. As you'll see from our conclusions, we felt that the applicant does indeed have, I think, a legitimate point over those, and accordingly I think we're suggesting that if you are still minded to remain with your original decision on this, that we do at least amend the refusal reason to perhaps delete reference to those two particular policies. Just finally, I think as I said, we've referred to the space standards, we've referred to the policy on CS2 and the energy requirements, and summarised, so just to confirm that Natural England had indicated that the shadow HRA habitats regulations assessment produced by the applicant would be acceptable, and they accept that with the measures including advanced planting which Natural England have suggested and which have been embodied within our recommendation, that with those particular points they would accept and effectively agree the HRA. So I think with some certainty that is something where our role in actually submitting that formally to Natural England, we can say with some confidence we believe that would be signed off by them. And finally, we've just set out as a response to some further points that Natural England made in terms of the considerations we've given to various biodiversity aspects of this application and the impacts that we believe the access road would have. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I'd now like to invite Councillor Steve Bridger to speak to the application briefly, as you do, and make the proposal.
Ouch, ouch. No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Roger. It is 25 to 5. I will speak for just a couple of minutes. You'll be pleased to know. Just summarising just a couple of points.
We're timing you.
Pardon?
We're timing you.
No, seriously. I'm glad you got that slide up, Roger. Yeah, obviously this was unanimously refused last time for the 5th time. I think this is the 6th time it's come to committee. A couple of months ago when we looked at it, my predecessor wanted a red line around this orchard, and so do I. I think the speaker, Mr. Cockram, who addressed the committee quite some time ago, we're going to be changing that, made, I think, lots of pertinent points. As far as I can see in the couple of months that's progressed since it came to committee in April, not a lot has changed. The only thing really has changed is that actually the proposed development on the rugby club to the north there, to the top left, is advancing. I spoke to the developer yesterday. They hope to submit an application by the end of next month. And I think that's noteworthy to say, notwithstanding, of course, I take the point that it will take perhaps 3 or 4 years for that all to come forward, because it's quite complex. I think, as I was saying in April, what I'm saying, I think what residents are saying in Yatton is, can we give us 3 or 4 years, please? Given we've got all sorts of things happening already at North End, lots of houses that have going up. Another application actually came in from Strongbox on the 10th of June for 39 houses at North End, which, doesn't look too bad. So, I think what I'm saying is, as submitted, I would hope that this committee would not change its mind on the decision it made a couple of months ago, and agree to confirm the resolution from last time round, really, to refuse the application. I do agree that we can drop references to policies DM36 and CS14 from the refusal. I think those are sort of legacy things from 2 years ago, to be honest, Roger, aren't they, that have stayed in there. So I think we can drop those. Those don't refer to the substantive, they're not consistent with the substantive reasons for refusal, which is really the effect on the village gateway of development, or the access road through the orchard there, when there is no need, because you can go through, hopefully, the rugby club, although there's not 100% guarantee that will happen. I certainly won't be calling that into committee. So the reasons for refusal are the same as last time, minus those references to those 2 policies. So I'd like to move again for refusal, Chair, and look for a seconder.
Thank you, Steve. Who would like to second that? Okay, thank you, Richard. Okay, debate? Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, really, enough is enough. Lived with this one for so long now that the Yatton Steering Group, which involved the Parish Council, the discussions we had, and Persimmon insist on coming back with the same plan. We had long discussions with the rugby club when the temporary pitch is removed. We knew that would be the eventual solution, and we made that clear to Persimmon. We then reluctantly agreed there's the possibility of an access road to get the site started across the orchard. Now, what they've done when you look at the plan is completely ignored that, because if you look at that plan, that's not a temporary road, because a temporary road wouldn't go into the road going around the estate. which means they've completely ignored what we said we wanted to do. We made it quite clear that nothing wrong with the application in terms of what they want to do, but access to it had to be, on completion, access and egress had to be through the new development going next door, not through the orchard. This developer doesn't listen, and therefore I fully support what Steve has said.
Thank you, Peter. Anybody else want to make any comments? No. Richard, do you want to make any more comments? Roger?
Chairman, no, I think it's all set out in the report.
Steve, would you like to sum up?
Move straight to the vote, Chair, please. I move for refusal.
Okay, thank you. You've heard all the debate now, so the recommendation, which is seconded for refusal, all those in favour? Again, that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on. Item 10, planning appeals. Richard.
Chairman, you'll see we've had another good run of successful appeal decisions, one far more than we've lost, which is excellent. You'll see that we're still getting appeals coming in. In particular, I draw attention to the fact we do have a string of enforcement appeals at the moment, and most of which seem to be going to public inquiry in quite rapid succession. So the team is under even more pressure than it normally is. So if you do have enforcement cases, please show patience, because they are extremely pressured. I just, in terms of the Bristol Airport appeal, which was that was referenced earlier, just a few words about that. You'll have seen just the changes that have been made to the council chamber today. That is part and parcel of the preparation for the public inquiry, which starts on the 20th of July, so a little more than 4 weeks. It is going to be held in this room, coupled with the Ken room behind you, and because of the COVID restrictions, the capacity is going to be limited, as it is now, to the 25 in this room and probably 12 in the room behind, which means that we are strongly encouraging members of the public to view the inquiry via the YouTube link. One of the reasons, and it will be screened live for all those that want to watch it throughout its duration. One of the things we are having to plan for, though, is for where people that have to participate directly, so witnesses or barristers, and they're not able to get in the room because of isolation or illness, that they can take part virtually. So part of what Mike Riggle and his team are doing is setting up the system so that it is possible to participate through a Microsoft Teams link. So these screens around the side of the room are part of that, and there's another one to come at the front, so that witnesses that, as I say, that can't come into the building can still do their bit from a remote location. But we would ask you, as part of the messaging out about the appeal, to help communities understand that we do have very limited access, and participation, viewing participation at least, should be through YouTube. There will be a session in the inquiry for public to come and make comments to the inspector, and there'll be more details on that shortly, because we do have a case conference, a formal case conference with the inspectors next week, where we'll get more details on the timetable and the arrangements. In the meantime, there is a public inquiry website which is set up. We've put an article in members only, which should come out tomorrow, which will give you the link to the inquiry website. And that's got all the documents, it's got all the proofs of evidence from the council, the airport, and the other parties. And there's a short article as well, which will explain a little bit about the process, and there's a link to some FAQs on the website as well. So it is all go, and there's a lot of people involved. It's a big project, and we're giving it our best shot, and it all kicks off in just over 4 weeks.
Chairman, point of information. I'm led to believe that all COVID problems cease, supposedly at this moment in time, on the 19th of July, correct? And the airport inquiry starts on the 24th of July. Am I correct? Yes?
Sorry?
So why...
Yeah.
are we going through this
Yes.
procedure if everything's back to normal?
Do you want to take it on here?
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't turn my microphone on because there were more than 3 on. The position is we have to plan, it has been a movable feast, and we have had to plan a number of possible scenarios in terms of the way the inquiry might work. At the moment, we're planning on the basis of the current restrictions. We had hoped that there would be announcements about relaxing lockdown a week or 2 ago. But as you know, government has held back from that. 19th of July, I think you're right, is where the next date which is being flagged. We don't know yet what will be said, but clearly we'll adjust according to that. But at the moment, we are planning on the basis that we've been planning. Regardless of that, the amount of capacity in this room and the Ken room is limited, and so we do need to manage expectation. We did look at alternative premises which might be able to accommodate more people, but finding somewhere that is available and affordable in this part of the world during the peak summer season for 3 months proved almost impossible. Well, it did prove impossible. So there are a number of advantages about being here to do the IT, the microphones, the security, the back office support. So it will work, and we're going to make it work, and we'll adjust accordingly. The one point I would have made, Chairman, is that because the public inquiry sits during the working day, and it will be probably Tuesday to Friday for the best part of 3 months, it does mean that the use of this room is going to be curtailed. So, for example, I think the plan is that the next meeting for P&R will move to a 6 o'clock start to enable the inquiry to sit during the day. The inquiry does break for 2 weeks in August, another week in September, so I think the August meeting shouldn't be affected, but we'll keep you updated on that.
Thank you, Richard. Is that okay, Peter? Yes, thank you. Okay. Right, moving on. Item 11, urgent business permitted by the Local Government Act 1972.
There's none, Chairman.
Thank you, Sue. Okay. Just one last thing. The next meeting, as Richard just alluded to then, of P&R will be held here in the new council chamber on Wednesday the 28th of July at 6 o'clock. And as he just said, this is due to the airport appeal being held here during the daytime. Thank you all very much for your attendance, and I close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
And Chairman, how good it is to have a new projector which actually shows things that we can see.
I think the next meeting is staying on the 21st, I think. 21st? There was some suggestion about moving it, but I think they're going to keep it on the 21st.
Oh, all right. Well, the last thing I heard was yesterday.
No, I think they couldn't agree to move council.
Okay, well, we can put that.
So I think it's staying as the 23rd.